Hey there, you are listening to the Small Fish Big Podcast, the entrepreneurship podcast that helps small brands develop the skills they need to grow. Full of strategy, tips and advice, honest chat, and inspiring small business stories from other entrepreneurs just like you. I'm your host, Rhiannon Loudon, brand and content strategist, brand photographer, and proud small business owner. I'm also a mum, a wife, and a travel, coffee, and donut addict. And I created this podcast to help bring small businesses together, to help entrepreneurs feel connected, and to share actionable information that you can use to achieve your business goals. If you're tuning in for the first time today, thanks so much for listening in. And if you are a regular listener, thank you for the support. It would be a huge help to me in growing this podcast if you could take a moment to leave a quick review. You can do that on Apple Podcasts by searching Small Fish Big Pod and scrolling down to the review section. And make sure you click subscribe to be the first to know when new episodes air. And now on to today's episode. Hello and welcome to episode 25 of the Small Fish Big Podcast. We are doing things a little bit differently around here moving forward. So we are going to have a bi-weekly topic, so 2 topics every month. And the very first topic is going to be brand values. So we are still going to be doing a weekly episode for you. This is going to be part 1 of the brand values series, I suppose. So part 1 is going to feature a small business owner who has a lot to say about the topic at hand, in this case, brand values. And part 2 will be a shorter bite-sized episode where I share top tips, advice, and a little bit of strategy that you can apply to your own business when trying to figure out your brand values. So today I am joined by the lovely Laura of Fernweh UK. Laura's business really puts brand values front and center. I have done some work with Laura on her brand and content strategy, and she has done such an amazing job of implementing her values into the content she shares. As I said, she's made it really front and center for her business, and I'm really excited to have her with us to talk to us all about how she figured out what her brand values are and how to best communicate them with her ideal customers. Hello, Laura. Thanks so much for joining us, and tell us a little bit about you and your business.
So, hi, I'm Laura from Fernweh UK. So I make bags and accessories in my wee studio up in Aberdeen. So I tend to use a lot of like rugged materials such as like waxed cotton and leather, and it's all kind of inspired by my own personal love for like the outdoors and like rock climbing. So everything's kind of tailored towards like going out adventuring, and then it's all inspired by like outdoor kind of naturey color palettes as well.
Very cool. And for those who don't know you already, I know your brand is quite well known around Scotland, and that's where most of our listeners are probably tuning in from. But tell us a little bit about when you got started and how you got to where you are today.
Cool. So I started up in 2014. So I graduated from fashion design at the Grey School of Art in Aberdeen in 2013. And I was kind of working away after uni, just kind of making a wee living. And then I really got into rock climbing about that sort of time as well. And I was kind of just looking for like a project just to kind of keep myself busy and just keep making and stuff, because I kind of missed the kind of sewing and the kind of whole uni kind of buzz. So I started making rock climbing chalk bags from wax canvas, and then things kind of just spiraled from there. I put them online, and people, like a few friends, wanted to buy them, and then it kind of got the local climbing wall involved, and then things just kind of snowballed from there, and I just started making other bags and accessories, and then moved into hats as well, and then things just kind of went from there.
That's really nice. I like how it kind of started organically from just missing creating and kind of creating for yourself and your friends, and then it grew from there. So I guess tell us a little bit about when it went from being a sort of, I don't want to say hobby, but almost like a part-time or a side gig to your proper career.
Cool. It was actually really quickly, it was really unintentional. I was working in a job that I really, really disliked, and it was making me really unhappy. And it was about, I think it was about 3 or 4 months into starting Fernweh that I was getting quite busy. I opened an Etsy shop and it was doing really well, and I just kind of felt like if I had a bit more time to focus on it, it could do so much better. I could kind of really be the brand that I wanted it to be, whereas I couldn't really do that at that point, where I wasn't really getting, like, my shifts were kind of like all over the place, and I was working like 56 hours a week at this like job that was making me really unhappy. So I just kind of like went for it and just thought I'll give it a try, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, and I can always get another job, but I'll only have like one shot at this. So I handed in my notice, and then 6 years later I'm still doing this, so something's going right, thankfully.
Oh, that's great. And sometimes I think it kind of just works that way. You start doing something on the side and, you're not really enjoying what you're doing, whether or not it was your plan to kind of build it up into a full-time business. Sometimes it just works out. So that's good that that's the way it happened for you. And I guess how are things as it stands now? Has your focus shifted at all, or have you just kind of kept growing the same product lines that you started with?
I've got a kind of same kind of core product line. So I've got like chalk bags and kind of climbing accessories, but I also I've now kind of moved into like tote bags, kind of like crossbody bags as well. It's kind of a bit of everything. But I really like my focus. Like when I started, I was kind of just making just for something to create, and just kind of like I enjoyed it and it was really fun. But as I kind of kept growing, I really enjoyed kind of pushing myself and trying to make like the best product that I knew I could, and pushing my own abilities, and kind of really focusing on using like really quality materials and making products that would like last a really long time.
That kind of ties us really nicely into our topic at hand about brand values. And I think that's one of the things that really struck me with your business is that you speak so strongly about what's important to you. And, just what you said there about how it went from just creating for fun to actually really putting the thought into what kind of materials you're using, what kind of product you're creating, and what that means. I think it's really great when you make that forefront, and it really makes a brand stand apart as well when more thought has gone into it rather than just what's going to sell or what's easy to make or cheap to make. You really kind of taken the time to think it all through. So tell us a little bit about, tell us what your brand values are, and then we can scale back from there to how you kind of figured them out.
I would say I've had a lot of time to like think about this over like lockdown and the pandemic, and you've obviously been a really great help as well. Kind of really pinning down my values, like I really think that kind of longevity in like my products is like one of my main ones, and I'm really really passionate about like the kind of slow craft and like slow fashion movement, which is all about like slowing down like the fashion supply chain and trying to make like products that are really considered and will last like a really long time and kind of age with people, rather than just like you wear them a couple of times and throw them away kind of thing. I'm also really I think like a connection is like another brand value for me, and kind of connecting like my work to the land by using kind of like natural materials that kind of inspired by like the outdoors, but also by like inspiring people to get outdoors as well, kind of bringing a wee bit of like adventure into my work through like the color palettes and like the designs and stuff, and also just like making with purpose rather than just like, as you said, making something that will sell, just making something that's actually considered and like has like a purpose, as well as like looking like stylish and looking good.
Those are great values, and I think all of those definitely show through in your work. So let's start with the sort of longevity, and I don't know if that kind of ties into the slow craft and slow fashion, but I guess tell us a little bit about how those things became important to you and how you sort of incorporated them into what you do.
I've always been quite passionate about like sustainability and like environmentalism, just because like I'm really outdoorsy. I love like going hiking, like being out with nature, and I just feel like we've really got like a responsibility to kind of look after it. But especially as a designer and from a design perspective, I really think it's important to kind of try and make the planet better than we leave it, kind of thing, and kind of use like our way of creating to kind of like highlight these issues. Like the fashion industry is one of like the biggest polluters in like the world. Like I think it's bigger than oil, like on level with like the oil industry. And there's so much like textile waste, like it's just like a mess. But yeah, so like if there's any way that we can slow that down, like slow down that kind of our like all the overconsumption that we're doing, like buying like fast fashion all the time, buying like I think I read a statistic somewhere that the average garment is only worn like 14 times before it's discarded. It's like 2 weeks of wear effectively. So if you can kind of make something that's going to last like 10 years or something, that's like going to cut down landfill like loads.
Yeah. And I mean, that's something, I think it's good that people are becoming more and more aware of these things now. I didn't realize the fashion industry was that bad, like that on par.
So bad. You know, there's a really great documentary. It's called The True Cost. I watched it a few years ago, and it was probably one of the like driving factors in kind of like looking into this kind of a bit more in depth. Kind of really like it's really shocking. It's a great watch, but it's like it really opens your eyes into just what goes on like behind the scenes, and like how your clothes are made, and like how everyone who makes them is treated as well.
Yeah, because I think people are maybe starting to think a little bit more about that, like where are my clothes being made? I'm not following it closely enough to know all the details, but something to do with a cotton manufacturer in China or something. And everybody found out that it was actually slave labor they were using. And, you know, I think a lot of people are aware that clothes that are made in these countries, you know, where children are making our clothes and getting paid pennies for it and things like that. But the other side of it, obviously that's really awful. But the other side of it too is how many people are buying like bags of stuff at Primark and places like that, where it's really cheap and really cheaply made, but it's not made to last. And you know, I think people go, oh, well, it was only a tenner though, so who cares? But it's not just the cost of it, it's the fact that where does that end up? And you're right, it sits in a landfill.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the idea of slow fashion, do you think that that's something that's taken off? Is this a growing movement? Are more and more businesses kind of getting on board? Or is it really, you know, because it's hard to imagine some of these big corporations that, you know, mass produce stuff ever going to that extent, you know, or ever kind of buying into that value, because obviously they're not going to make nearly as much profit that way.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that is kind of growing kind of arms and legs. It's definitely smaller businesses seem to be kind of taking it on board and kind of designing with that kind of idea in mind, rather than like bigger corporations. But hopefully, I'm kind of hopeful that it will kind of start to shift, because the more people who like change their shopping habits, like the big brands will see that's where the money is, and they'll kind of maybe shift their kind of manufacturing processes and slow down that supply chain a little bit, hopefully.
Yeah. And it's good. Like, it's kind of interesting, I think, even having these conversations with friends, because obviously everybody likes to spend their money on different things. And, you know, people kind of go like, this is important to me. But I do think a lot of the time it's just that people haven't taken the time to stop and think about it. Like, they haven't really thought about the effects of just buying whatever the cheapest possible clothes are, or, you know, buying shoes that only last a couple of weeks or whatever, and then are falling apart. Like, that does make a big difference. And when you think, yeah, you're only one person, but on a bigger scale, if people are, you know, if that's how long clothes are lasting, and you're throwing out a garbage bag of clothes every couple of months, that's, you know, that really adds up.
Yeah, I think there's a really big like cognitive dissonance between like buying something in a shop and then like thinking about like the whole supply chain through from like manufacturer, even just like growing the materials to like create the garment as well.
So how did you then, this is something that you've obviously thought a lot about and it was important to you as a person, but how did you then incorporate that into your business? Like, how did you what decisions did you make that were aligned with that value?
Well, I started kind of researching, I kind of went through my own supply chain of what materials I was using and what companies I was using for my materials. And I kind of like decided that I personally wanted to use a lot of like kind of as local suppliers as possible, kind of keeping the kind of like carbon emissions down from like transport and stuff as well. So I tend to use a lot of materials that are manufactured in the UK rather than like overseas. And also like working with like local companies, you kind of know the supply chain better as well. You kind of get to know the kind of manufacturers, like who's making those fabrics, and they've got a bit more kind of transparency on their own supply chains rather than just like buying a fabric from a miscellaneous shop online. Maybe don't have that kind of, you can't discover like where it's really being made kind of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think some of these decisions must be kind of hard to make, because obviously as a business owner and a small business owner, when you're just starting out, you want to keep your costs down.
Yeah.
And I imagine it's